Hello, everybody. This is Waravet Cholasin of AIT Extension of the Asian Institute of Technologies. So again, we are meeting you again for our webinar programs that we putting in AIT Extension as the leadership series that we are meeting you, the audience, regularly. And today it is the opportunity that we will have the session that conducted by the professional companies and also the practitioners, which is live from Singapore. So we are going to have the session and also the webinar session that related to the disruptive leaderships, which is I will explain to you later on. So before we start the webinar, I would like to invite Dr. Christopher Gainier, the Executive Director of AIT Extensions of AIT, to welcome you all and also to give some remarks for this webinar. So Dr. Chris, please.
Thank you, Kunja. Hey, again, this is Chris Garnier, the Executive Director of AIT Extension. I want to welcome you to our series on leadership. As you'll see, we will have continued invitations to dynamic players within the field, within their industries, that will talk about leadership and will present their views and their perspectives on leadership. And I invite you to come back and join us for our many, many sessions. You know, today we are extremely privileged to have Professor Sattar Bawany from leadership to discuss disruptive leadership. You know, I was privileged and honored to get his book, and what he discusses and what he talks about and what you'll learn from his sessions is so relevant today. As obviously the COVID situation has become extremely disruptive to many businesses, to many organizations, but even beyond COVID, disruption happens in businesses and organizations all the time. It could be something as simple as a dependable employee all of a sudden takes a job in another place. And how does that disrupt or affect our leadership? What we're going to get from Professor Bawany is how to look at it in a way of maintaining flexibility, agility, as he says. And again, we're privileged to get his perspective and his understanding from his center and how they look at disruption being an extreme part of leadership and how we as leaders handle that disruption. So again, I really am honored that you're here, and we're really honored to have the professor with us and to get his perspective on disruption and what that looks as leaders.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chris, for your welcome remark to the audience and also your introductions about this program. So I would like to, again, to repeat that today's session, we have the knowledge sharing session with Professor Sattar Bawany, who is the CEO of the Disruptive Leadership Institute, which is the company is in Singapore. And he has been running different organizations and also being the global facilitators. He is the coach that running the projects and coaching program to various companies in Asia and ASEAN. He also, you know, the practitioners in leadership himself, so that he collect a lot of experience during the time of the change, so that he is the author of the book names the Disruptive Leadership in the Disruptive Times in 2020. So based on his ideas, so this seminar, webinar come in, which we named the webinar as the Transforming the Next Generation of Leadership for Industry 4.0. So without further ado, I would like to now invite Professor Sattar Bawany to present his knowledge sharing session with the audience. Professor Bawany, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Kunjo. A very good afternoon to each and every one of you. Thank you for joining us again. For those of you who have been following me over the past year during the pandemic, I've run a series of webinars all over the world talking about the challenges and what we need to do to manage the disruption. And today I will talk a bit slightly different is related to the theme of the disruptive impact of both the pandemic and the digital transformation, and what do we need to do most importantly to manage one of the key organizational challenge, which is about managing the talent, future leaders, and even current leaders, and how do we help them to be prepared for the new normal? How do we help your leaders to be prepared for another pandemic, for another disruptive event, which I'm sure it would happen again in our lifetime? So the question is, what do we need to do now, taking into consideration over the past year what we have experienced? Now the time to take stock, to talk about what we need to do moving forward, the new normal. This webinar, the title is the Transforming the Next Generation Leaders for Industry 4.0, is based on years of research. As far back as I started doing this research the year 2000 during the dot-com bust. The year 2000, 2001, when we look at what happened to the dot-com companies' technology impact on the economy, and since then, how technology has disrupted our way of life, the way we work, and so forth. And in 2018, I published internationally a series of articles called the Leading Industry 4.0. And you can see in the picture on the left, that is published by Business Expert Press, my publisher in New York, which published a series of 7 thought leadership articles regarding what leaders need to do to manage the disruption of Industry 4.0. And I'll talk a little bit about Industry 4.0 in a short while. I won't go into that, but there are a lot of resources I was going to give you where you can go and download, read, watch the videos. Then thereafter, a year later, 2019, I was looking at the impact of the technology, or rather the disruptive impact of the technology or the Industry 4.0 on the talent, from a talent management perspective. And that's where the second book called Transforming the Next Generation of Leaders, where I look at from an organizational development, leadership development, human resource management, human resource development, how can you prepare future leaders by looking at a framework called transition coaching and putting in place a structure, an assessment and development center to help organizations to develop future leaders in the disruptive Industry 4.0. Then during the pandemic last year, I was doing a research on the impact of technology, the digital transformation on the future work. That started actually immediately after my first my 2019 book, but during the pandemic, somewhere in February, I was discussing with the publisher, and we were looking at to what extent. Remember, 26th of January is when the Wuhan lockdown, and that was the beginning, where worldwide we see the impact of the COVID-19 on lives, on livelihood, on business, supply chain disruption, and so forth. And this way, then we were looking, okay, how can this, we can understand a little bit better in terms of what leaders can do. What are some of the things that leaders need to do differently? And I was studying many other organizations, leadership, Delta Airline, look at Marriott, Hotel in the US, mostly in the US, and how the leaders were managing the disruption. And of course, at the same time, the research was been, for about a year, I was looking at companies on how they manage the disruptive impact of digital transformation. So the book was published on 30th of July during the pandemic last year, called Leadership Disruptive Times. And the book, has been endorsed. And you can go to the website, the Disruptive Institute, Disruptive Leadership Institute. You can see a lot of endorsement by thought leaders worldwide in terms of the impact. How the book contains a lot of tools, resources to help leaders to manage the disruption. And interestingly, for years I've been going around talking to organizations about the need to embark on digital transformation, and I'm sure the government too, many government institutions are talking about that. But it takes the pandemic really to accelerate the adoption of digital transformation. It takes the pandemic to jump into, create the sense of urgency that organizations need to put in place the digital transformation blueprint within the organization. So the rest is history. As you know now, a lot of governments are putting in place fiscal measures, putting in place support measures to help organizations, especially the SME. They are one that is sorely lacking in terms of infrastructure, in terms of know-how, in terms of putting in place the digital transformation architecture in the organization. So this book is a blueprint, I would say a toolkit for organizations worldwide, across all organizations, across all industry, SME, large MNC, global, doesn't matter institution, whether in healthcare, education, university, whether you are in non-profit, charitable, religious, church, mosque, any organization, you can apply very simple, easy to use framework and tools. So that leads to the concept, today's topic about transforming next generation of leaders in 4.0. I think it's very important for us to understand. So we take a step back. Let's take a step back and understand what is exactly Industry 4.0, because we all know in many organizations, people talk about Industry 4.0 or the fourth industrial revolution, and many leaders are talking about it, but very few leaders truly understand what does it mean. What does it mean, and how can you leverage on the technology to be able to create this, what I call the sustainable competitive advantage for your organization for the future. And to do that, you need to address, of course, the most important issue is the talent, the people issue, not process, not technology. Those are secondary, and I'll talk about a little bit about that towards the end, because the creating a sustainable future requiring a blueprint where you put people before process and technology. And I will share the framework which I've written in the book. So let's talk about what is Industry 4.0, and also I will start with 1.0 and end up with the 5.0, which is the latest, where we are now started to enter. Not all industry, not all countries. Many countries are still struggling between 3 and 4. So let me just start from the beginning. The Industry 4.0, if you look at the evolution, we started back in the 1700s, where we're talking about water and steam. Has a very profound influence on the way how businesses is run, how manufacturing operations are being conducted or operated. And then you move to the second industrial revolution in 1800s, where electricity has been the primary engine of growth or driver for success in many manufacturing, the French Industrial Revolution and so forth. And then you come to the computing era, or the third industrial revolution, which where you see computing, where technology, you look at the IBM, for example, the mainframe company at then, not today, of course, they're totally different organization. But back then, organizations like DEC, IBM, and many others, which was instrumental in trying to create, the application of technology within organization and transform the way we, the operating flow, manufacturing, and of course the rest, many other businesses where technology has an impact. And then we move to the fourth industrial revolution, where it started around 2010, 2011, and the most, I would say, the critical event was actually 2011 at the Hanover Trade Fair, when Bosch, launched the concept of Industry 4.0 in German, Industry 4.0, looking at the cyber physical systems, confluence of robotic, AI, looking at big data, IoT, iOS, confluence, and to creating a solution that will solve many other manufacturing problems at that time on how to optimize manufacturing efficiency, productivity, and it was fantastic. And of course, and then in 2016, Klaus Schwab, the chairman of WEF, World Economic Forum, came up with published a book, and he's a German, by the way. So he came up with the book called The Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is looking at how organizations, government, society can leverage on the concept of Industry 4.0, the confluence of all these advanced technologies to create a better life for all. So that is what is going on now. Of course, now we move to the current fifth. It's not actually really much known about Industry 4.0, and I'll talk about that in a short while after I've gone through a quiz asking you a couple of questions. But what is happening now, we're seeing that already happening. And I'll talk about that in a short while. Some examples where you can see 5.0, very practical example, and you're going to make life easy for all of us. You're going to improve the quality of life. It has improved quality of life in some segment of the society. It has improved the medical advances, and you look in Japan, in the US, in Europe, and I'll give some example in a short while. But now, come back to you and over to you. I'm going to ask you a question. I'd like you to participate. So what I'd like to do now is for you to tell me or write in the chat box. So I may not be able, I cannot see on the full screen. So Kunjo, can you please read those answer from your end? What are the answers given, or Dr. Chris, one of you. So the question is, in what way does the Industry 5.0 differ, do you think? Give a guess. How do you think the Industry 5.0 would differ from 4.0 that we're experiencing today? Okay, just give me one word, one or couple of words. Put it in the chat box, in your Zoom chat box.
So the question is, in what way does Industry 5.0 differ from Industry 4.0?
All right.
And question number 2 is, indicate your answer in the chat box. Okay, so that is the guidance. So we invite the audience to maybe, exercise on maybe this question and put into the chat box so that I can share with Professor Badawi.
Do we have any answers at all?
No. Anybody would like to exercise this a little bit?
Give it a shot. I'm sure you guys can just share.
Okay, I have to answer now. Professor Bawany, the first answer is human element included in the 5.0. Okay. Second answer is IT and human.
Okay, very good. So that's good. So IT and human. The other person earlier talked about human element. Very good. So who else? Anybody else?
I guess they are coming, but so far we have 2.
What about you, Joe? What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is about the machine things. So I think after 4.0, I think we're going to have something related to the machine. And now there is another answer, Professor Bawany, humanizing machine learning. That is the third answer.
Okay, that's good.
Humanizing machine learning, that is the third answer. So we have human element, and the next answer, the next answer is the establishment of the balance between human and machine. The next answer is more robotics using human emotions. And the next one is from India. He introduced himself. So yeah, he said, good day. Thank you.
Okay.
So he said that IoT. Okay, so our colleagues from AIT, Dr. Zakir Hussain said data-driven decision-making, IoT, with everything with human robots taking care of every works.
Yeah, okay. Now, most of yours is there not only describing actually what we are experiencing now, what we call the 4.0, which is a confluence of IoT, Internet of Things, Internet of iOS, Internet System, data, big analytics, and machine learning and so forth. But the difference actually is close to the first 2 who mentioned, about the, when you talk about Industry 4.0, the biggest worry when I traveled, before the pandemic, many parts of the world, when I was giving keynote and discussing with leaders, CEO, business leader, one of the biggest concern is, will robot over the Industry 4.0 going to create social, unrest, social inequality? Are you going to have mass unemployment? And those are valid concern, because the issue here is, will robot replace us? So that was the main concern. So if you look at the 5.0, the biggest,
Professor Bawany, may I interrupt? One more answer is big data from our colleague from Laos, PDR.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so again, big data is all is 4.0. So okay, let's move on. So the 5.0, the impact, the greatest impact is going to allow you to shift organization, to shift manufacturing tasks into what we call the optimized robotic mechanical manufacturing, to optimize robotic using what we call cobots. And cobots, in my book, the Leadership in Industry 4.0, I wrote about cobots. And cobots is about the collaborative robot. And it's interesting because one of the concerns, as I mentioned earlier, why the criticism of Industry 4.0 was that this element of the robot being able to do everything, practically everything that human being, practically everything from a production efficiency. But there's one thing the robot will not be able to do is the emotional element, the creative aspect of the human, perspective from the interaction between human and robot. So I think that is important. But the benefit, what Industry 5.0 really give us, is the idea of mass customization, personalization, where we can create solutions, services to suit every single of our customers uniquely. And that would allow us to actually implement the digital transformation. The strategic intent of digital transformation is about customer centricity, and you can do it to the absolute, to each individual customer. And actually, the concept of mass customization is not new. It's been around since the 80s. If you remember, those of you who are old enough, like me, who remember back in 84, 85, when in the early 80s, when IBM no longer has the proprietary to the PC, business technology, and you have company like Dell. Dell was instrumental in coming out with the what we call the PC, desktop computer. Yeah. So DC, the desktop computer, it was interesting that Dell allow you to customize by deciding what type of screen, what type of CPU, which Intel generation, what type of hard disk, sound card, and so forth. And Dell has been doing it in the late 80s. It's not new. But of course, it was mechanical. It was a lot of things was still done mechanically. You see large production houses, not only in US, in Taiwan, in Taipei, in Taiwan, in Singapore, in Penang, in Malaysia, China, still doing those tasks. Of course, today, fast forward 30 years later, you see how robots has been instrumental in helping the production and optimize the production. So it's not really new to concept. Of course, the personalization, what we're going to see in Industry 4.0 is going to become more profound. Of course, the other is Tesla founder Elon Musk. He leverages on that the technology, Industry 4.0, to a greater extent when you're talking about the evolution of the autonomous vehicle, the driverless car. Of course, Google also doing that as well, and Amazon and many other companies, and also SpaceX, which Elon Musk founded as well, in helping people, ordinary people like us, who otherwise cannot afford. It's unthinkable to think of going to the moon, going to space as part of, as something that is made available to all of us, ordinary people. So the technology will shift. Now, let me give you a real example, real life, where it's still at a experimenting, still at a research development. It's been used in bioscience, in life science, in combating cancer research, looking at how the technology, nanotechnologies, can be used to help, to treat, identify, and also treat cancer. And the other thing is that what I'm quite excited is this evolution, research into what we call the diabetic, treatment for diabetic. As you're probably aware today, you have insulin, many different types of medication is being what do you call it, discovered and offered in the market space. But you look at insulin, and for those who are, unfortunately have to put on the insulin pouch, what do you call it, a bag or pack, whatever, with you all the time, and you need to titrate the insulin dose, different types of day. And what has happened is that with the technology using machine learning, using AGI, and how can you now make it so specific dosage for individual by studying the pattern, and in healthcare, phenomenal advances, but it's not because a lot of things are experimental. And of course, the other thing is, I will move on after this, it's about in defense. And we have seen how the impact in defense, for example, one of the challenge that I found is that many countries, when I go around asking each country, okay, what do you know about, the defense technology in your country? And of course, things are done very hush-hush. But the reality is this, if you look at the drone, if you look at Android, a lot of things has been already been used. There's a good movie, it's in Netflix, it's just in my mind, is about an Android which looks like a human being, everything is, I think inside something, I can't remember. But it's very fascinating using AGI, artificial general intelligence. The highest form of AI is artificial general intelligence, higher than machine learning or deep learning, where you can really simulate human thinking, how you can make autonomous decisions with no supervision. But it's very dangerous. You just imagine the question of ethics. So there's a lot of issues to be resolved. But the future is here. The reality is that you cannot escape. As leaders, we need to study and understand how does it impact our organization, how does it help us to leverage on this technology to be able to bring about value for our customers. This is what we need. And of course, in government, you look at government institutions since 2016, 2017, the worldwide, you see a lot of government, of course, the EU, in Germany, of course, Germany, UK, France are leading the way in terms of leveraging technology to what I call government 4.0. How do you use technology to deliver better service for your citizens in terms of automation of processes, biometric passport, you look at security, national security, and so forth, and defense, of course. And how to use, for the simplest RPA, robotic process automation, is being used by government agencies worldwide. And Thailand, within ASEAN, of course, Singapore is in the forefront. And apart from Singapore, I think the two countries that over the last 3 years, as I travel across the region, I found Vietnam. Vietnam and Thailand is making a lot of inroads. I believe Thailand is very focused on Thailand 4.0, but the Thailand 4.0 is not about the IR 4.0, I mean 1.0. That Thailand 4.0 is how the economy is transforming from agricultural to the technology-driven. And they have even a department called the DEG, Department of, I can't remember offhand, but it's a government agency. It comes under the office of the Prime Minister, and it was a royal decree, by the king. It was instituted in 2018, and now the government is putting a lot of effort in Thailand. And I think it's great. And government has to do that, because to be able to increase the shared prosperity, better quality of life for people. But the challenge at McKinsey, you can see the report at the bottom of my slide there. McKinsey has reported that, well, it was last year, in February, they report that many organizations, or many government institutions are not ready, because they know they need to do it. But the future of work is all about technology, to disrupt the way we work. But the problem is leadership. It's a capability. Leadership ability to disrupt their thinking, their mindset, to create a blueprint for success is not there. This is the biggest impediment. Looking at what happened in the pandemic. One of the common things I hear again and again during the pandemic, from February until December, or November, December, the word unprecedented. unprecedented pandemic, unprecedented crisis, unprecedented COVID-19. Why? Which I don't blame those political leaders, business leaders. I don't blame it all because many of them have not come across this before. And there was no roadmap. There was nothing that you can rely on. There's nothing, of course, many people say, okay, let's look at SARS. Let's look at, H1N1, the swine flu, and many other past experiences, but they're different. Totally different. We have seen how COVID-19 is totally different. Now with the variant, what is happening now, countries are struggling, governments are struggling on how to contain that. What it means that we have to come together. We have to come together, leverage on shared resources, shared learning. Leaders need to disrupt their own mindset by being open. By being open and accept that they do not have all the answers. And leaders can do with less hubris, more acknowledgement, more humility. Unfortunately, leaders worldwide, we have seen from the US, with Trump administration, when you look at other parts of the world, the same thing, we've seen that the challenge is that when you don't accept, when you don't acknowledge that, government are not able to move quicker to combat this unprecedented pandemic. So this one. Now, the topic is about next-gen leaders. So let me now go into what do you mean by next-gen leaders? How does it impact? So if you look at next-gen leaders, I'm going to ask you now, who are these next-gen leaders? Can I now invite all of you now to go into your poll box and give me again, put in your, please use put in the chat box, not there are two boxes, I think you use the chat box. And send to all, don't send to only the panelists so the rest can see. But you can choose on the send panelists or send to all so everybody else can see your answer.
So who are these next generations audience? You can now exercise your brain a little bit, taking a break, and then you can think about who are these next generation in your mind that will be part of the Industry 5.0.
Not only 5.0, but we are talking about more general. Yeah, the next generation. Who are this next generation? Not about 4.0, not about 5.0, but generally, when we talk about next generation, who are they?
There is answer coming in. Leaders around the age of 30 years old who have faith with AI and big data specialization. That is one. Second answer is Gen Z and Gen X. Okay, so we have three answers now. Those are young people, about 30 years old, Gen Zs and also Gen X. And next answer is to have the next generation leader should be the CIO and innovator. Okay, that is one. And also next leader will be creativity. That is the answer.
Creativity, okay. We were talking about next gen leaders, not competence. Okay, never mind. We will come back to that later. Okay, so the answers well, it's interesting. I think when you talk about Gen Y, Gen Z, it's more about the multi-generational impact. They are quite related, but not directly answer the question. So we talk about next generation in my book. Both books in the 2019 and 2020, I elaborated what it means. When you talk about next generation in organization, whether you are in the government service, the public service, or in the private sector, whether you're NGO, non-profit, doesn't matter. These are the future leaders. These are future leaders who demonstrate high potential qualities. What do you mean by high potential qualities? I will elaborate in a short while, the next slide. But here I want to stress next generation leaders are important because you need to prepare for succession. Whether you are political leaders, government, civil service, or private sector, all of us need to prepare for the succession, our successor to take on. We cannot be there forever. Even you are family-owned business, SME, you need to prepare, either from your own family or people outside, to be able to ensure they are ready. Because with this pandemic, one of the lessons that we can derive from the pandemic is the impact of the what we call the COVID-19 on organization sustainability. And we have seen how important it is to ensure that our leaders are ready in managing, in addressing this issue, because most of them do not know what to do. They don't have the right skill set. They do not have the right ability, competency to address the problem in terms of how do you solve those problems. So this is where you need to prepare them now, and there will be more disruptive event, a more black swan event, I call it, that you're going to see in the coming years. So in the 2020, the latest book, I explain in detail, I built upon the 2019 book, and I say, look, what is important here, you need to ensure that this next generation of leaders are those of high potential, not necessarily high performance. Now, this is very important concept. I'm not going to go into that because it's very technical from HR perspective, human resource perspective, but not all high potential are high performance. Not all high performance are high potential, but generally, you will find that most of the high potential, I would say about 90%, also are high performers. Now that they do very well, they consistently achieve target, they're able to manage change, they can demonstrate the values of the organization, they inspire, influence, able to impact and influence people to do what they want them to do, not because they have to do it, because they want to do it. And that kind of leader, inspirational leader, that we need more, not managers. Now, so the next generation of leaders demonstrate those qualities. And it's very important. If you look at over the last 20 years in my work looking at leadership, I've been doing research for 25 years, since 1994, 95. I started my research in leadership looking at what are the qualities, what are the competencies, from my days in Mercer, Human Resource, Hay Group, Foreign Corporation in Boston, with DBM, and now latest EDA. Now, and of course, my current role at CE and DLI, over the last 25 years, there are certain attributes, qualities, competency that differentiate between what we call the high potential leaders, successful leaders, and the others. So the question is, we need to identify them, equip them. First, we need to assess them. Identify who they are. Then next time, we need to assess their readiness. Then you need to be able to develop. So in the book, I talk about the process called EDC, Assessment and Development Center. So how do you identify these future disruptive digital leaders? Because now, the time is now. Because one thing that I learned, a lot of organizations were struggling when they're trying very hard and trying to put in place the digital transformation, strategy. They're not able to have the right leaders who can execute. So that is very important. But why? Why do we need to bother about transforming next-gen leaders? So there are a few things I want to highlight here. So again, over the last 25 years, I was tracking some of the leaders I've coached, I've guided, I've trained, I've developed, looking at some of my direct reports over the years who I've have the privilege of serving, and looking at how they have grown. And one of my direct report, who was working with me at Mercer, today is one of the global leader in Google in back US. So I've seen the tremendous. I'm very proud to say some of them do have that quality, some don't. And one thing that I found is very lacking, very important. Number one, for years, research has shown in SHRM, Society of Human Resource Management, CIPD in UK, look at Conference Board, many other organizations consistently, one of the top 5 doing WEF, DDI, CCL, one of the top 5 competency over the years has been what we call critical thinking. How do you create leaders who are able to think not outside the box? The common thing that we all hear, you need to think outside the box, but there should not be a box. That's the thing. When you demonstrate the ultimate critical thinking level is when you do not see a box. And what I call the EDA, Executive Development Associate, talk about cognitive readiness. Cognitive readiness is a suite of 7 competencies that you need to demonstrate. It's a confluence of creative thinking, critical thinking, mindfulness, communication, gut feeling. 7 set of, in my book, I elaborated very detailed. How can you leverage? And this is same set of competency that NASA uses to be able to train engineers. Like CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency in US, how they train analysts to think, solving problems of national security. The FBI, the DHS in US, Department of Homeland Security, and many other agencies worldwide where you need to solve complex problems. And use a model called the Phoenix checklist used by the CIA on how to solve complex issues. And you can apply that to business because leaders need to solve complex business. And the pandemic clearly shows that we do not have what it takes. We do not have the competency to solve this problem. And the worst is that we have leaders, government leaders, institutions, or even business leaders who are not willing to keep an open mind and accept and learn from others, especially those younger leaders, younger workers. And a concept that I strongly encourage all of you to adopt, if you have not already started it, is called reverse mentoring. Reverse mentoring is when we learn from the younger generation, the Gen Z, the Gen Y. We may be the C-suite, we may be the CEO, COO, CIO, CTO, CMO, CHRO, but we do not have all the answers. Is the young are more resourceful, more resilient. They are more, I think more creative because the way they've been brought up, the way they're exposed to the, today's education system. So the question is, we need leaders who are able to, and this is where you need to develop them, help them to prepare. So now we're going to look at what are the challenges from an organizational perspective and from a leadership perspective. So there are two. So from an organizational perspective, the situation is this: whether we like it or not, we need to ask ourselves. The war for talent, when McKinsey talking about the war for talent back, in the 80s, in the 90s, war for talent is going to become more intense today because we need leaders or digital, or what I call disruptive digital leader, which has the competency, which I will talk in the end. What are the 7 competencies that for successful leaders to manage disruption, for future disruption, what's required? We are sorely lacking, and you need to develop them faster. The leadership pipeline, how to do them, develop them faster. And this is where we need to ask ourselves, do we have what it takes to transform our leadership team, the future leader, the next generation of leaders, is to ensure that a pipeline of leaders is always available so they can help us to reinvent ourselves in time of crisis. Survival is a survival, the feature that the survival of the organization depends on the leaders that you have in the organization that are going to transform. And this is where you find a lot of organizations, including government, are struggling. In some government, you bring the same group of people from the civil service, from the military, coming into service. And there's a big problem what we call group thinking, where people tend to think alike when they come from the same group or same source, whether you're from the public service or you're from a particular segment of society. That is very worrying. So we need to ask ourselves, what can we do to develop these new leaders? What sort of competency? What are the challenges? And the pandemic has shown us, I'm not going to talk about the pandemic, but I want to show you as of 12 p.m., just before we started 2 hours ago or 3 hours ago, I logged into the Johns Hopkins website looking at the current number. You look at when I started researching on the COVID-19 in January, actually started when we first hear about this 31st January 2019, when the Chinese government notified the WHO in China about this the emergence of this new virus, a flu-like virus or SARS-like virus. From 1,000 to 10,000, from China it travels to US, Europe, and when I was writing the book, it was 2.5 million, and then in July 30th, when I published the book, it was 10 million. So I published on the 30th of July, it was about 10.01. So it's about 10 million. Today, it was 6 months or 7 months, 8 months later, or 7 months, 7 months later, and it's 109, coming to 110 million. You look at the way it's multiplying, and I'm expecting the next 2 to 3 months, it's going to be double, even possibly if things, the COVID-19 variant is not being handled, and countries struggling, even in US this morning, you know, the CDC, Dr. Fauci was on CNN saying that the challenge is that they are, if they don't manage this, it's going to impact, it's going to really disrupt. Never, you can't imagine. If you're talking about the last 8 months, the way things been disrupted, if this is going to, you know, allow the variant of this new strain of virus, COVID-19, from UK, from South Africa, from Brazil, is going to really make things very, extremely, very difficult. So this is what we need to be prepared. For those of you who want to know more, as I said, I'm not going to talk about it. I've been doing that for 1 year. For the last 1 year, I've been talking about this until last month. But all my videos, webinars, most of them, not all, some because of they're proprietary to some organization in-house. So, but those public webinars, I put it on the YouTube, so you can go and get and subscribe free. There are a lot of articles I publish. You can buy the book. Of course, I encourage you to buy the book at Amazon or at Business Expert Press. The link there, you can go in and get a book. You know, you can get a lot of, I can share with your team. But a lot of articles I put it for free. You can go to the link there at Disruptive Leadership Institute. Or the ce-global.com publication. You can download the article and subscribe to the YouTube free. You can see the video there, Disruptive Leadership, video.ce-global.com. Or you just go to YouTube, type Disruptive Leadership Institute, subscribe. Every other week there will be new videos. Whenever there's a new event where I'm allowed to post, I'll post those videos to keep you updated. So go and read, and there's a lot of exciting stuff I've shared and I've put forward. I can learn about some of the challenges, how leaders like Anne Sorensen of Merit International, how President Jacinda Ardern, a great leader of New Zealand, Prime Minister, was able to manage the disruptive challenges very effectively. So now let's come back to this before we go into how now I'm going to share with you the what it is. The challenge I talk about, talk a little bit about now, how to solve it. The problem that we have found, the disruption over the last, I would say, since 2010, 2011. Remember I told you the German was the front runner, or I would say the earlier adopter of the Industry 4.0, Bosch, Siemens, Daimler Chrysler, and many others, German automation, industrial automation, automotive, and so forth. They're the forefront in technology, Industry 4.0, cyber kinetics, cyber physical system, robotics, and so forth. And one of the challenges that we found that they are not able, leaders are not able to manage the pace of change. The change is so drastic, it's changing so rapidly, and this is where we need to address how can we help these leaders? How can we equip them to manage those changes? But because this is never been seen before. As mentioned earlier, it's unprecedented. So I don't blame the leaders because they never seen it before. So it's our role as CEO, as CHRO, head of HR, head of organization to provide the resources and support for these future leaders, to equip, or even current leaders. I mean, forget about future leaders. Even if you look at many during the pandemic, many of the current leaders are not able to manage it effectively. So what happened is that they struggling, they didn't know where to go, and even CHRO, head of HR, do not know what to do. So this is where we need to ask ourselves, what can we do? What can we do to help these organizations that to prepare for the next disruption? So this is what I call the disruptive digital leader. So how do you resolve it? Let me give you some tips, some solutions. One is I'm going to now ask you the last question, last poll. I promised you last poll. What is one competency that you think is critical for success to manage the disruptive challenge? Okay, so let me now ask you just one competency. What exactly do you need to do to ensure that to be successful, to help leaders be successful.
Okay, the audience, have fun. So any ideas you can put in the chat box so that I can read to Professor Bawany to give him the answers. Number one, Professor Bawany, agile.
Yeah.
Agile is one. Able to remain composed under stress. That is another one.
Okay.
My one could be innovative.
Okay.
And the next one from the audience is critical thinking.
Very good. Yeah. So it's quite close. I think so far, all of them are relevant. They're not mutually exclusive.
One more, Professor. Proactive.
Yeah. Okay. So there are many skills. As I said, some of them I already mentioned earlier. The cognitive readiness, which include critical thinking, developing what we call mindfulness, able to connect the dots, strategic thinking, and so forth. But what I believe is important for us is to look at some of the leaders who will be very successful. And I'll give you in my book, I talk about Microsoft. I talk about the success of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, and I was looking at how Uber, Grab, and of course Singapore best known bank, or now global, the best bank globally, digital bank globally, DBS Bank. So all these case studies are written in the book, and you can get a lot of examples that you can use for your organization. So I decided that we'll have to make it easy. So I said, okay, let's look at it, a term which I use called Leadership 4.0. And in my definition, in both books, in the 2019-2020, I define the 2020 book, the latest book, I expand in detail what it means is that it's about leaders who can demonstrate effectively a set of competency, which I call the disruptive digital leadership competency, which are critical to be able to develop and build, engage high-performing teams to drive success in the organization through a culture of what we call customer centricity and creative innovation. It's called a mouthful, but that's what I define, how I define it. So it's all about ability to create leaders who can think creatively, who can lead a team, who can inspire the team, who can bring the team to the next level. So this is important. Yeah. So what are these 6 competencies? So if you look at the definition in the book, I talk about the 6. Start with disruptive mentality, which is innovative driven. To create a good examples, people like Jack Ma, Howard Schultz. Then we have visionary entrepreneurial skills. Piyush Gupta, DBS, and you have Sattar Nadella. Then you have Google. A good example. You look at the co-founder of Google. And then you have, if you look at the third one, which is called cognitive and critical thinking. This is where many organizations today are emphasizing, as I mentioned, since 2015, when WEF published the report about the critical skills for the next 5 years in 2020. This is number 1, critical thinking. But I think in our research, we talk about more than critical thinking, but we talk about cognitive readiness. How do you combine emotional and social intelligence, empathy? Because remember, the robot, as I say, in Industry 4.0, robot cannot have that empathy, that creativity elements missing. Of course, the AGI, the artificial general intelligence, the highest form of AI, is still under research, and we see there are some element of human intelligence, some element of the cognitive and the humanistic aspect coming together. Yeah. Therefore, resilience, we're talking about agility, the empathy, social skills. This is what I'm talking about, the people agility, how do you combine emotion, social intelligence. And empathy is best demonstrated by Sattar Nadella, the third CEO of Microsoft. In my book, I have a chapter dedicated to a section of the chapter dedicated to a case study about Sattar Nadella, how he has transformed Microsoft, leveraging on empathy, and it's a very important competency he stressed for all leaders when they were looking at selection of future leaders. One of the critical competencies as part of the assessment center looking at is empathy. And this is where he demonstrates, and there's interesting story, personal story about he and his family, how his son Zain was born, when his wife was going through a very difficult pregnancy and gave birth, and the son was unfortunately suffered some impairment, and how he become more reflective and how he used the empathy competency in a very big way in developing a product, how he engaged his team and so forth. And lastly, leadership is all about success. Because if the last competency, many organizations tend to take for granted. No. In a disruptive digital leadership competitive perspective, in a disruptive digital environment, when you're implementing digital transformation, when you are managing disruptive event like COVID-19, where you're talking about the financial crisis back in the Asian financial crisis back in 1997, 98, then the global financial crisis in 2008 to 2009. What is important is about results. And how can you achieve results? By putting people first and foremost, and that's tough. But it can be done, and there's a lot of case studies I've shared in my book. Now, but to drive success, you need a culture, what we call creating an environment where people thrive, people be successful. And this is what we call the PPT, people before process and technology. As I mentioned, very important. Many organizations, when I do consulting, when I've been asked to come in and help organizations in Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, US, Vietnam, in China, anywhere in the world, one of the things that I always ask, what have you done? What have you accomplished? 90%, I would say 90 to 95% of organizations, first thing they do, they keep on looking at technology. Okay, what's the best system? What's the best software? What our competitor has done? Who's doing what? Let's buy the same thing because we have the resource. No. Look at your people first. Are they ready for them? The readiness. So people before the process and technology, that is important. And of course, the other element, customer centricity, I talk about that, customer centricity, focus on the customer, and everything you do must be, the digital transformation agenda must be about the customer, nothing else. Innovation driven, new product, new solution, creative innovation, data driven decision making. We talk about 4.0, it's all about data. How do you big data, analytics, predictive analytics, collaboration, working with competitors, working with the government, working with industry partners, and then open and trust-based. The most important to me is the open and trust-based ownership, because the rest cannot work if you don't trust, you don't create. As a leader, you need to create that ability to transform the culture by demonstrating humility. As I said, during COVID-19, we've seen a lot of leaders fail miserably because they lack of humility. They're not able to show, and they're not able to communicate effectively. Then the best example, one, the public sector. Look at Anne Sorensen from Marriott. Go to my YouTube channel, when Google, or you can just Google Anne Sorensen of Marriott Hotel CEO, and he was undergoing chemotherapy during the COVID-19, and how he continuously communicate and address the concern of people, and authentically. It's about authentic leadership. Many political leaders, many business leaders do not have that quality. And then the other is government leader. I would recommend you to look at Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand, another great example. When he needs to push in from one level, to another level, because of the pandemic, how things have shifted, and he communicates authentically, openly, and there's trust between him and the people. And lastly, of course, this disruptive mentality, I talked a lot about that earlier. And lastly, agility, flexibility. Earlier, I talked about how you need to move and shift your position. Okay? So we're going to come to the end before we create a name. So what we have done at the Disruptive Leadership Institute is to help organizations, and we have done successfully in several organizations over the COVID-19, and some testimony you can find on our website. We run a series of programs we developed based on my team worldwide, in the US, in Asia. We have launched a series of programs to help leaders to develop the disruptive digital leadership competency. And you can see the name there. I wouldn't read all of them, but you can see there. And you can go to the website, disruptive.institute/masterclass to get more detail, or you can just write to me, and I'll be delighted to share you more information. As I mentioned earlier, I decided to have to make available free all my videos, all my articles, except the book, because it's published by Business Expert Press. Of course, you can get. What I've done is selectively over the last 6 months, I publish once a month an article for each chapter summary, where you would be able to get a glimpse of what the book I talk about, but you will not have the detail, the case study, the framework, the tools would not be explained in detail like a book. But you can go and get those, again, the link there, the articles, DLI, Disruptive Leadership Institute articles, or the videos at our website. You can subscribe free and get a lot of resources free. Of course, you can order the books. I will highly encourage you to support me and my publisher, because the book is one of its kind. As I said, there's a lot of books about COVID-19 in the market, most from the technical, not from a leadership standpoint about developing leaders, future leaders. So you can get a lot of tips, and if you want to know about identifying, preparing, the digital transformation, what it takes to identify leaders, then the next generation of leaders, that is the 2019 book on the right, that will be relevant. Yeah. To conclude, so let me just conclude before I hand over back to Kunjo for the Q&A. Arthur Schopenhauer, back in 1800, German philosopher, says very interesting, and I think it's very relevant what we are going through today. He said the task of a leader is not so much to see what no one yet has seen, but to think critically what nobody yet has thought about, that which everybody can see. Now that everybody see the pandemic, everybody see the disruption of the digital, but a disruptive digital leader is one who is able to think critically what every problem that people are facing and be able to find a way to resolve it. And this is what is missing. This is what leaders today are missing. And because of the education system, because of society in general, I think, but the good news, and I think the Gen Y and Gen Z, I believe we are going to see better in the next 10 years. I think we're going to see a much better in terms of the attribute or the quality of employees of the Gen Z. And Gen Z are those born between 1995 to 2010. Gen Y are those born in 1980 to 94. So in the next 10 years, Gen Y is going to take on the leadership position, senior leadership position, and Gen Y is coming in to take on the middle management supervisor. And they are the one that the future, the hope, the next generation, that we're going to see more and more leaders taking place. And they are, because of the education, the way they've been brought up, the way system, even in Singapore, I think I've seen a lot of younger, my grandnephew, grandniece, my nephew and nieces over the last 10, 15 years, and I see the way they think is different compared to when I was in education school. It's very different. And the education is long to help to prepare. In Singapore, the tagline used to be Thinking Nation, Learning School. Thinking Nation, Learning School. So people need to learn critical thinking from young and teach your children. If you have children, grandchildren, and one of the things that I always advocate, let them make mistakes. Mistakes, of course, you need to be mindful that for certain type of mistakes. So people do make mistakes. You are not in fault. So learn from the mistakes how to be a better perspective leader. Before, again, for those who want to contact me, you can take a screenshot with your phone. These are my contact. You can email me, connect me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. The best is LinkedIn, because I posted every other day articles, observation from the book, commentary from global magazines, Harvard Business School, MIT Sloan, and so forth. My perspective of this topic on leadership, disruptive leadership, and on the concept of next generation of leaders. Okay, with that note, so now time for the dialogue session. I will now hand over to Kunjo.
Thank you very much, Professor Bawany. It is very interesting sharing sessions, I think, and also is very, very nice, very beautiful PowerPoint presentations. I think the PowerPoint presentation is something making a very key points and very clear to the audience. I mean, I think this is excellent presentation from your side. I have some answers and some comments left in the chat box so that I can maybe raise to you so that maybe you can respond to that. With regard to the skills of next generation leaders, one is also the risk management. That also the audience think that they also should have some risk analysis and ability to anticipate what is happening next. That is one of the ideas that coming from the audience. And also the next generation leader should have something that very different in terms of, thinking and acting and making decisions. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, let me understand the first one, Kunjo. So if I understand, it's something to do with risk management.
Risk management.
Okay, I'm trying to look at the question here on the Dropbox. I cannot see the question.
Oh, no, the chat. I mean, actually, no, it's not the question, but the people leave answering to your previous.
Okay. So I think you're talking about, if I understand the first question about risk management, is it?
Yeah, it's risk management is also an essential skill of the next generation leader.
Yeah, that I have already answered. I will go through. I will repeat again. But the first one about risk management. You see, that's the thing about risk, because it's an oxymoron. One, you're talking about in the era of the disruptive technology, in the disruptive leadership, you need to allow people to experiment, or we call experimentation. So experimentation is a technique where in innovation, you need to allow people to experiment and make mistakes. Yeah. So that means you need not necessarily be risk adverse. So you need to allow people to make mistakes. So there must be some form of flexibility. So I think it's very important. We cannot, again, it must be a balance. If you're running a financial institution, you're running a data security, certain industry segment where you need to be more stringent. Yeah, more stringent from a risk perspective than others. But generally, I would say you need to allow less restriction for people to experiment. Therefore, less risk averse. So they are more prepared to try new things and to encourage them, create a culture of innovation. Okay. This first one. Second question is about what are the skills? Am I right? What are the skills in industry?
Yeah. The second comment is about the skill, and also the audience also thinking, adding that the skill that we need for the next generation leader is on, be able to doing something different, and that is something that the colleagues suggest, right?
Yeah. So I think for the next generation of leaders, earlier I think I mentioned. Let me see. Sorry, let me just skip through the slide. These are the skills. Of course, you can go a little bit in detail. One of the things that I mentioned earlier, the cognitive readiness, is not here because it's very detailed. It's about critical thinking, about what we call being present, mindfulness, about connecting the dots, the communication, which all come under the third one. It's a cognitive readiness. So that's very important. How do we think critically? Now, critical thinking is not same as creative thinking. Now, many people do not understand, because many people thought, critical thinking is about, creative thinking is about finding solution, new way of doing things. Critical thinking is a much deeper, and how do you use empathy in trying to look at things differently that nobody has thought about, and how do you then create a new way of working, new way of developing solutions. So deeper and analyzing information. How do you analyze information, evaluate which is the important information, which do you take, which do you discard, especially in the world of fake news today, of alternative news and so forth. How do you make business decisions when you need to evaluate all this plethora of source of information? So this is where critical thinking comes in, very important. And the other skill I mentioned about mental agility, because disruptive mental agility basically means that you need to challenge your way of thinking, how to create a different mindset, and you need to suspend judgment. And I always advise leaders, when I train leaders, when I coach leaders as an executive coach, one of the most important competency is how do you suspend your mindset, what we call the disruptive, to develop a disruptive mindset is to suspend judgment and be open. But it's very difficult because all of us has what we call cognitive bias. We have cultural bias. We have filters that we look at certain information which will prohibit us from making effective decisions because of our past experience. So you need to suspend that. And to do that, you need to develop a very strong level of self-awareness, which is sorely lacking in many of the leaders today.
Thank you. The next ideas or next questions or kind of comments from the audience is that Professor Bawany, what do you think about the role of the universities or colleges in terms of their curriculum? How do they need to adjust the curriculum so to suit with production or producing these new leader for the next generation? How do you think about this?
Yeah, of course. As I said, good example. Not to a great extent, but the Singapore government is a good example, which has put in place, I think, over the last 20 years, trying very hard since our senior minister Tharman Shanmugaratnam, who was the education minister. He tried in the 1990s, what called, as I said, the Thinking Nation learning schools. How they create that mindset in primary schools, secondary schools, in the universities today. And this is solid lacking because you look at, over the last 20, 30 years, there have been students have been, learning the same way of doing things, same way of, the instructional design of programs and so forth. There's nothing really new until, I would say, the last 5 to 10 years, things are improving. So I believe they are better. And I think there's hope. There's hope because I'm seeing much more improvement as being an adjunct professor in various universities and being visiting professor. And I talk to a lot of students worldwide. I'm a professor with Paris Graduate School before, and now with IP in Paris in French schools. French students, UK students, European, American, Asian. So I think there's a lot of progression, improvement, the way they think, and the curriculum has changed. More need to be done. I think more need to be done at the national school level, but I think they are moving that way. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we can see more improvement. Hopefully.
Thank you. Next question is about the leader competencies, number 5. Which is related to the empathy and social skills. So the audience asks how to evaluate the skills of the employees or the staff in terms of the empathy competencies. How we are going to measure that?
Yeah. So one of the things that, okay, before I talk about the formal way, I always tell my participants, leadership workshop, coaching, I said the best way, if you have a teenager children, at the age of 12 to 18 or 20, or even as young today age, even as young as 8 years old, ask that, are you empathetic? Do you listen? Do you demonstrate that caring, sharing? I know that the kind of quality of empathy. Yeah? So they are the best. They're one of the way that I always go and ask them. They will tell you, are you empathetic enough? Because they will tell you as it is, and at the end of the day, you still love them. How hard they will tell you, how they tell you as it is, and you will still love them. That's the unusual answer I give to a lot of people. But a formal assessment, of course, the formal assessment is used EQ assessment tool like Bawany EQ, or EQI, or ESI from Hebrew. The main assessment tool or EQ second, where they are able to help you to series of questions, either self-evaluation, or you do 360, where you ask other stakeholders to evaluate you, and you can get a good feedback. So I think there are a lot of tools in terms of assessment to assess the level of emotional and social intelligence. And empathy is one of those emotional and social intelligence that you look for when you assess, when you coach. And it's very important because today, I think it's one of the most important skills you need to have, especially when you look at the current disruptive event that we experience We need leaders who are more empathetic, who is able to align and able to, relate to the employee situation. And this is something what we call in the concept called in HR, what we call organizational justice and procedural justice. Meaning that how do we ensure that in our communication with our employee as they go through this disruptive events, changes in the organization, how can we be more empathetic, understanding? And to do that, empathy is the biggest important competency a leader can have to be able to bring success, bring change.
Right. We also have also about the assessment, and this is going to how to actually assess the readiness of the organization, that we be going to be ready to produce this leader. How to know, how we could know that.
Yeah, so we at DLI, myself and my team have developed an assessment. So we use what we call the competency-based interview, CBI. Part of the Assessment Development Center is in the book I explained, the 2020 book, both 2019 and 2020 book, I explained the process of how do you assess the readiness through an ADC, Assessment Development Center. And they include, of course, online assessment, psychometric assessment. They look, we look at behavioral psychometric, using Hogan assessment, or we use behavioral event interview, a series of different tools that you can use to psychometric to assess the readiness. And as an executive coach, we certify many of these tools, and I can spend a couple of hours for example, there are a couple of engagement over the last year where the board wanted to appoint a new CEO or successor, and I was tasked with to interview and assess the readiness, whether that potential candidate, the three candidates, 2 internal, 1 external, whether which one would be ready for that to replace the incumbent CEO. And one of the things, of course, I do spend a couple of hours plus series of assessment, then through simulation and so forth, able to assess whether the person demonstrates those competencies. So there are many competencies, and I have done it. I've done it many times, and they are readily available. But the question is, many of the tools out there which are generic does not relate to the disruptive digital environment based on the research that we did over 20 years and we put into the book. There are specific competency, and the questions to elicit the response are very specific assessment for those set of competencies. So it's not generically, anyone can do it, but there are different set of approaches, framework that we have developed as part of the Disruptive Leadership Institute. We offer that to our so
we are about to the timelines, but we can have another two questions, the last 2 questions. The next question is about the critical thinking, and the audience asks that, do you think the critical thinking should also include the EQ too? Because we embrace with the digital transformation and people have to work with the robots, and sometimes this working with the robot, maybe we need to also adjust ourselves when we are dealing with the people. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, no, I mentioned that many times already. I say yes, of course. The third level, the cognitive readiness, if you look at the screen now, that in 2019 book I explained it. Even 2020 I explained that cognitive readiness is a combination of critical thinking, strategic thinking, and plus emotion, social intelligence, and how do you use the self-awareness, relationship management, empathy, all together. Yeah, it's a confluence of the emotion, social intelligence, critical thinking. Yes, of course, it's absolutely critical. Absolutely critical. Yeah.
Yes, and last one, but not the least, is that how do you balance between the empathies and discipline in the organization as the CEO?
Yeah, this is a very good question. So I always believe a great leader is one who knows how to balance using different styles of leadership. The challenge we face when I was looking at the pandemic, the disruption by the pandemic, the many leaders either were too extreme. One is they use coercive, tough, very directive, create further instability, further chaos, or you have another set of leader who simply don't know what to do, they withdrawn, they keep away, they do not know what to do. So you need to know how to use situational leadership, different set of leadership style in a given situation. So that is important. So whether you use empathy, whether you use no coercive, whether you set very high standards, so which of these 6 are important in different situations. So what I'm saying that you depend on situations, so situational, contextual. So you need to use as you see fit in the different situation, and you adapt as you go along. That's important. Knowing when to use it more important. That's part of our development, our workshop that we do is to help leaders to develop their situational leadership. Kunjo, I have a few questions here. I mean, I just been received, so let me just quickly, because I got a few minutes. Let me just, if you don't mind, let me just quickly address that, because I already some of them I already addressed it. Maybe because I'm a little bit too fast. You can, when the video is being made available on the YouTube and so forth by AIT and so forth, or on my YouTube, you can look at it. But Rina, one of my client, Rina Sarif, Malaysia, asking, how do we measure empathy in the performance evaluation of talent management? As I said, it's through EQI, ESI, Baron, or 6 second, a lot of EQ assessment. You can use that effectively, and you can use CBI, competency-based assessment interview, to assess that. Rasini Kai asked a question whether schools will need to revamp their curriculum teaching method in phases as we embrace 5.0 in 5.0. Yes, of course, in the next 10 years, 5.0 will become more prominent. And I think Singapore, we are very fortunate, as I said, we are already started to look at the critical thinking, empathy, but there's more need to be done. Technology is one part of it, embrace technology, and 5.0 is about confluence, about personalization, and how do we advance embrace advanced technology. Schools have a very great importance, influence, and role to play. And lastly, Mr. Zakir Hussain, I believe from AIT, asking about the next generation of leaders. What's the age group are you talking about? Is it in the people in the 50s, 60s, are they excluded? Or are they included? So he has 2 questions. Let me address the first question. Next generation of leaders, I'm referring to future leaders who are going to drive success of the organization. But having said that, I made a remark earlier that during the pandemic, I realized even the current leaders don't have the skill. So actually, whatever I talk about next generation is applicable to the current leaders, but they don't have the skill. They don't have the disrupt. What you see on the screen here, many current leaders fail to demonstrate. So you need to offer to both current leaders and respective of age. Can be 60, 70. I have a participant who is in the 70s. I have one in the US who's in the 80s who attended my workshop before, and one participant who attended my webinar, in Dallas, when I did in Dallas in November, who's in the 80s, was asking questions. So I think my point here is, at any age, Mr. Zakir, and the last question he asked that the Industry 4.0 requires people to be acquainted with ICT, machine learning, IoT, technologies. We are still lagging behind. Therefore, understanding those will still be required, or are we? What are the prerequisites to reach 5.0? So, Mr. Zakir, you're absolutely right. The prerequisite of 5.0 is the ability to appreciate and understand and demonstrate what you need to do successfully in 4.0. Because the 4.0 is what today we are experiencing it. Today, the technology, the advanced machine learning, you look at the data analytics, you talk about AI, machine learning, deep learning. And of course, all these things, in 4.0, it's about data-driven. And it's already happening. We need to master that. We need to know when to use it, how to leverage it before you move to 5.0. The 5.0 is mostly used in manufacturing, largely manufacturing, where you can do mass personalization, mass customization of solutions. And you can see that, of course, in healthcare, in government institutions, in education. You can use it largely in those areas, but you need to embrace the culture that allows 4.0 to thrive. So the answer is yes, it's a prerequisite generally to allow you to move to 5.0. The 5.0 is where the combination of these robotic and the human aspect, the empathy, the creativity is being developed to provide personalization. So with that note, I'm exactly 4:30. So I want to say thank you. Thank you so much to all of you. Before I hand over back to Kunjo to close, I please, as I said earlier, continue to engage with me. Any further question you may have, send me an email, or best is communicate on LinkedIn. It's easier. LinkedIn is the best. Then I will be able to get back to you on LinkedIn and subscribe or link me up, follow me, whatever, in all the various social media. So with that note, I want to say thank you so much. I'll hand over back. I will thank AIT on behalf of the Disruptive Leadership Institute and my team, and also from iGroup, our partners. I would like to thank AIT for this opportunity. Kunjo, Kun Hashim, Dr. Daniel, all of you. Thank you so much. It's a privilege, and I look forward to the opportunity. And one of the new programs the next 3 months, 6 months, I'm developing is called Leading into Industry 4.0. What do we need to do to lead into 5.0? And this is the trend to prepare leaders on the post-pandemic. So, and also the post-pandemic era, what do we need to do from the mental wellness, from the employee well-being, preparing them to be ready back to work, the future of work. That's some of the themes that you can come up. Follow me on my social media. Whenever there are webinar that's free, you can join public webinar. You can join and update yourself with the latest. With that note, thank you so much. Kunjo, over to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Sattar Bawany. So thank you for your very nice presentation, as I said, and also I believe that the content of the presentation and your conversation with us very interesting, and I think we can perhaps review this in the source of the information that you are given. We also would like to thank AIT Extensions and AIT Extension team to produce this program today. We also would like to thank the iGroup, our collaborator, to produce this program, and also last but not the least, we are thank you to Disruptive Leadership Institute, which is Professor Bawany is the CEO of there. So I believe that we can also, maybe in the future, we also will go in depth into the discussion on the tools and further concept that Professor Bawany have in mind, so that it can be also benefit to the audience. And last but not the least, we would like to thank the audience that being with us for almost 2 hours, and they are very active. Thank you for all the questions and also points that you are making, very useful comment. So for this event, thank you so much, and until we see you again, bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Professor Bawany.